Hello everyone, and welcome to the grand, mighty, and jealous despot known as the Comic Book Vault. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And Dan, it's time once again for new acquisitions. We've got lots of books for you today. Dan and I are going to do a whole bunch of stuff together, and then at the end we each have a couple of books that we both read separately. We're going to start right off with our one DC book for the week that we did together. Don't worry, I've got a couple more for you at the end. You know why, Dan? Because the Batman books always stack up, dude. Like, if it's Batman one week for me, that means I'm going to have, like, at least 3 Batman books, it seems like. So, we're going to start off with Batman. Just plain old, straight up Batman. Batman number 19. Dan, Bruce Wayne's greatest foe? It's not Jimmy Olsen. It's not Jimmy Olsen. No, it says
cop out in this issue.
What's that?
At least they didn't cop out and they actually did what's on the cover in this issue.
Sort of, kind of, except it's backwards. Where yeah, that is Jim Gordon. Yeah, but that's not necessarily going to be Bruce Wayne. But I don't want to go any further than that. I don't want to give away exactly what this is, what happens in this. But you will not be surprised to know that the real Bruce Wayne does not actually shoot Jim Gordon. I don't feel like I'm giving away too much by saying that, hopefully. Anyway, what do you think of this issue, Dan?
I thought it was really refreshing because
that was the word I was going to use.
The main story and the backup, it's nice to just have a Batman story that's not tied into some big continuous company-wide initiative like the death of Damian Wayne or the Court of the Owls or the death of the family. Like, we're just doing like a straight-up one-and-done Batman detective story, and then the backup we get here, which is drawn by Alex Maleev, which is great. We get this really nice team-up story between Batman and Superman dealing with a threat that neither of them have really faced in this new continuity before. So it's really interesting stuff.
I gotta say, one of the things I really appreciated about the... Well, actually, let's not call it a one and done, because it's not. There's a cliffhanger. It's going to keep going.
For sure.
So it isn't just a straight up one and done, like last issue was. But but I'm with you, Dan. I do appreciate the fact that it's not, some big giant sprawling epic story. It's nice for Scott Snyder to occasionally remind us that he can do a straight up regular Batman story. But it's also not forgetting continuity. It's also reminding us of things. It does talk a little bit about some of the things that have occurred recently, and it's nice to see this villain again. But I don't want to give away who it is because it kind of tells you everything.
Yeah, if you figure out who the villain is, you kind of can guess every beat that the story is. Snyder presents it in such a way where he's presenting it the sequence of events out of order, so you kind of have to piece it together along with him, which is really nice. It gets you to sort of think like Batman, like the detective, piecing everything together. I like when writers, especially people on Batman, do that sort of thing, where they put you in the mind of the character, not just in with the dialogue and thought bubbles and stuff. You're actually thinking like them reading the story. It's very engaging. I like that about it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The art from Capullo is as good as ever, I think. Some of the expressions on Bruce Wayne in this opening sequence here, where we have this bank robbery, are really fun. He gets to draw Bruce Wayne being expressive and smiling and doing a lot of things that Bruce Wayne doesn't usually do. So I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't have a great deal to say about it. I thought it was just a solid detective story for Batman.
Yeah, I agree. It's good to see Batman doing some detective stuff like this and dealing with just villains on the ground in Gotham City, because that's what I like in Batman. So yeah, I'd recommend this one if you've been reading the series so far. It's pretty good.
Let's go ahead and move on then to Star Trek Countdown to Darkness number 4. Dan and I did not have a glowing recommendation of this book last time. In fact, Dan and I did not have a recommendation for this book last time. We did not recommend it.
No, this book is essentially Countdown to John Harrison opening a door. This book really...
It is, yeah. It's setting up the villain of the next Star Trek movie in that he, spoiler alert, he opens a door.
This book was extremely disappointing, just as a whole.
I have to say, Dan, I have to apologize to you for getting you into Star Trek just in time to waste your money on this book. I've got to apologize for that.
At least it wasn't an ongoing series, and I could, have it as a self-contained miniseries, I suppose. I mean, there were some interesting things.
Oh yeah, no, there were. Go ahead.
There were some interesting things in issue 3 and issue 4 talking about the proxy wars and the political allegory, with the Klingons sort of being like the Russians and the Federation being like the United States, which is a classic thing for Star Trek. I'm glad that the writers at least get that.
Yeah, that's good.
But the thing about this book is that this issue essentially says that none of the ground that we cover in this book is going to matter in the movie, because we introduce the Klingons in issue 3 and issue 4. We sort of get more about them, but you know that this can't be their introduction because they're going to be in the movie, and for people that obviously haven't read this, which is going to be a lot of people, they're going to have to cover all that same ground in the movie anyway.
And it will probably
all
be
of the
different
stuff with
ground.
Kirk and Spock. It just gets them into a place where we need them to be by the beginning of the movie, and it's sort of contradictory at times too. We had talked about that thing with Kirk where it's a little bit inconsistent, where he goes through the same character arc he's supposedly going to be going through in the movie. It's really strange. This just feels like it doesn't matter, and it's sort of superfluous.
In that way, it is your typical prequel comic book. This is the kind of thing you usually get with prequels. We got lucky with the last Countdown, even though, I mean, it has its goofy issues, but most of those are in the movie. The count, you know, Star Trek Countdown is a different animal because it bridges the gap between Star Trek we knew already and this new thing. This couldn't do that. I mean, what would you do with this exactly? I still think that they certainly could have been a little bit less obvious in the kind of again typical direction they went with Robert April. I felt like all of that was really kind of forced. I didn't buy that he would care that much about the people on that planet. All of that. This is just kind of a me thing. I hope that the Klingons in the movie don't wear these helmets the whole time. Because there is a deleted scene from the Star Trek movie that has Klingons on Rurapente wearing these helmets. And because, like, in that movie, Nero goes to Rurapente. The Klingon prison planet is mentioned in the film, but we never actually see him there. So when they cut to just, you know, several years later and him with, like, half his ear missing, you don't even know why he's missing half his ear. Well, it's because he went to Rurapente. They actually shot it, and they have these Klingons wearing these dorky-looking helmets. And, well, they're kind of fun. I sort of like the idea that the Klingons would have helmets that have ridges, except that wouldn't they have to be sculpted directly for their face because the ridges are always different? I think that's really weird.
Good point. So they have to be personally sculpted. That doesn't sound very practical at all.
No, it doesn't sound practical at all. And I thought it was just a lazy way not to have to do the makeup. Because, after all, if we're showing the ridges on the helmet, it's not like we're being all cool, like, oh, we're not going to show you what Klingons really look like. No, that's what they look like, except when you take the helmet off, you can see the ridges. I mean, like, I don't know. Anyway, I hope they don't do that in the movie. Even if they have these helmets, and you know they will, or at least I assume they will, because they had them in that first movie, but they cut it. I hope that we actually get to see them without them. But anyway, that's just a minor thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I wanted to sort of ask you about plotting in this was, see, I'm not as familiar with the entire canon of Star Trek as you, and I haven't seen every TOS episode, but, like, they mentioned that Starfleet has an intelligence agency that's similar to things that the Klingons are doing. Is that... Would a utopia need a shadowy intelligence agency to, like, do things like that?
Yeah, Starfleet does have Starfleet intelligence.
Okay.
The thing about it is, you have to remember that the planet is a utopia, but space is not. So, like, they have to... So they do things in space, and space is not a nice place, and other planets are not a nice place, so you would need operatives. The thing is, the way everything is kept so hush-hush away from Kirk in this, it almost feels a little bit more like Section 1 or Section 31 than just straight-up Starfleet intelligence. Section 31 is the actual shadowy Starfleet intelligence that you get in Star Trek, starting with Deep Space Nine. That is, I'm just telling Dan this, if you already know Star Trek, because Dan doesn't know this. That is part of the original Starfleet Charter. That is kind of it's underground. A lot of people don't know it exists, and it operates autonomously, and it's in the charter, so Starfleet can't do anything about them. So they have license to do anything. and they're shadowy, and they kill people, and all kinds of interesting things like that. And so they are to Starfleet what, this won't mean anything to you, but they are to Starfleet what the Tal Shiar is for the Romulans, and what the Obsidian Order is for the Cardassians. All of these major races have their, and the Klingons don't need this so much because the Klingons are already a warrior race, and they
do everything out in the open.
They do it out in the open.
The cover of espionage and all that sort of thing.
But there is a lot of espionage when you get races that are all about espionage, like the Romulans and the Cardassians. You find out that the humans have it too, but they don't let other humans know about it. I really wonder if the movie isn't going to have Section 31 or something a lot like it. And that would be kind of interesting, because there is some shady business going on here, and you almost get the sense that there's so much shady business that the whole idea of the movie might be something about how Starfleet is not as perfect as they kind of tout them up to be, and that they...
Okay.
And that maybe the Prime Directive... This could be interesting. I don't know where they're going with it, but that maybe the Prime Directive has more to do with kind of covering their own butts than it actually does with having this what they think is like this major ethical thing that they need to follow all the time. I'm not sure how much I like the idea that Kirk gets to the end of this and he's almost anti-Prime Directive. I feel like this is kind of a one-time sort of operation, like the idea that you would go through one thing and you'd be like, I just don't know about the Prime Directive, man. Like the thing you got to remember is that Kirk and Picard and pretty much every Starfleet captain at some point or another is going to multiple times go against the Prime Directive, because on a case-by-case basis, sometimes it applies and sometimes it doesn't. And guess what? They never get court-martialed for it. Starfleet always understands that, and they leave more things up to a captain's discretion than this comic book would lead you to believe. And that's something that bugs me a little bit. Starfleet is way too, babysitter in this.
Yeah, that was something that April was talking about, how that, when you become a Starfleet captain, they take away all of the things that got you that position in the first place. And I had wondered about that, too. One of the other things I sort of resisted was, I think Uhura is a little bit unlikable when she's like, Spock, you can't risk your life to help people because I need you.
Yeah, and the way she worded it was so... like broad sweeping, where she's like, you have to promise me you will never take risks.
Yeah.
You're the first officer on a starship. You can't ever make that promise to anyone. Spock, you need to stop pretending like you believe in logic, because nothing you do makes any sense at this point.
Right. That, I don't know.
I didn't like
Spock
that.
Characterization in this new continuity in general has bothered me every time I've...
But here it's really oversimplified.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, yeah, so once again, I'm not going to recommend this, although I like this issue a lot better than last issue. And I thought some of those ideas are interesting. I mean, like, if they want to take Starfleet and make it more like an irritating, bureaucratic kind of, because there is bureaucracy in Starfleet, but the idea that they would make it almost like a corporation might be interesting. I don't know. I don't think it works real great here, although it might have had those ideas permeated the whole book. I feel like they kind of show up here, and I could have almost just read this issue and done without the other three. So whatever. It's not bad. Also, I thought that the art was a little bit lacking in this one too. I mean, I liked a lot of it, but Kirk's face is just weird in this.
Kirk's face is something that I had seen changing from panel to panel throughout the entire series. There's especially panels in here where like his entire head looks like it's compressed a little bit.
Yeah. There are other panels where he's almost drawn like ape-like or something.
Yeah, it's really strange.
His facial structure is just wonky.
It's just the faces, really, of humans. Like, the Klingons he draws fine, the ships look great.
They're wearing helmets! That's easy!
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And still no explanation for why we have a female Mudd who seems to be Bajoran. I guess she just is that way, and that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Very true. Like,
Dan,
I agree with you. Some of the ideas are interesting, but the execution is far from what I would have liked. But I guess that's what I should have expected from a prequel comic, like you had said before.
Yeah, I mean, but
unfortunately, anyway.
Well, I expected it to be better than this though, because I did like a lot of things about the first Countdown, and that's the reason I bought. I don't buy everything Star Trek. That's a lot of the reason I bought this, but
right, you don't buy the ongoing series regularly.
Not regularly. I wait to see what the story arcs are going to be. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
But anyway, well, we talked about that ad nauseum. Let's go ahead and move on. Now it's time for Uncanny X-Men. I'm sorry. It's time for Uncanny Thor: God of Thunder. Number
Uncanny
7.
Thor? I'm surprised that isn't a book.
Uncanny Thor. Well, we got Uncanny everything else right now. I mean, but this could get funny, right? Like Uncanny Deadpool. And anyway, Dan, this was a fun issue. My favorite thing about it is that we get to see a whole lot of this great dynamic of old Thor, who is now the Allfather, and young Thor, who got sent to the future, and they actually discuss that time travel and how weird time travel is, and there's this whole thing about, like, Thor not wanting to turn into his father, but then he sees that he does turn into his father. It's fantastic. What did you think?
At least that's how we perceived it. Because you had brought up an interesting point before we started recording, after you had just read the issue, where Thor perceives himself in the future as being his father because he's got the beard thing going on. He's the Allfather. He has the Thor Force. He ruled over Asgard for 10,000 years, but we don't see Thor governing a civilization. This is Thor after everyone has died, and he's just the last line, the last warrior, and he's basically doing what Thor does now, just running into battle against a foe that looks like it has insurmountable odds against them. If we had seen Thor maybe during the prime of his rule as the Allfather, it would have been a little different. Maybe he doesn't manipulate people like Odin did. Maybe he's a little bit more Odin can be kind to people, but maybe he's a little bit more honest with people because of the humility he learned on Earth. We don't really know. It's an interesting sort of juxtaposition, because that's the thematic crux of Thor, is resisting becoming your father and all of that sort of thing.
Well, Dan, thank you for making my favorite point for me, and more eloquently than I said it. One of the things I was thinking when you said that too was that also maybe part of it is, you learn from your parents' mistakes, and he saw what happened with Loki, and he didn't want to do that. I mean, like one thing I wondered was, would the Allfather Thor do the same kinds of things like his father did, like pick up a baby frost giant and raise him as his own son? Would he manipulate situations like that? You don't know. So that's one thing that's really interesting, is that Thor gets there and he sees his and actually I think, now that I'm thinking about it, that Aaron addresses this in the book in a really subtle way, where he has the Allfather Thor tell Thor to go into this room that was always forbidden to him before, that because only the Allfather could go there, and he doesn't know what he's walking into. He doesn't know what he's supposed to go get, and then it turns out that the way he wants him to prepare for battle is to drink a bunch of mead. And that's very Thor. So I think the idea is that he hasn't changed all that much, and that he's only become somewhat wiser, and that Thor warms up more to his older self because he realizes that he still has a sense of humor, and that they still like the same things.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. I didn't even think of it that way. I just want to touch a little bit on the sense of humor thing that you had mentioned too, because I think this book is very good at balancing having a great sense of humor about itself. And Aaron sort of has this really great voice for the Vikings and their culture, but doing it in a little bit of an over-the-top way where you can laugh at them, where, like, Thor is drawn in the old Thor is drawn in a panel here with his head tilted back, like, kind of, laughing into the heavens, where he's like, "Are you ready to ride into battle?" And, like, they're, like, drinking mead, and they're on this floating ship, and they're like, "We're on this floating ship, we're gonna go ride into battle and, like, kill all these people," and, like, it's so over-the-top that it's kind of funny. But it fits with their culture, because that's who they are. That's what Vikings would do. So it works in a really great way. There was another joke towards the end where there was a god talking about what was the line? He was the god of pancakes or something like that.
He's the god of pancakes and something else, I can't remember what, but he said 3 or 4 different things where they would be 2 completely unrelated things, and I can't remember them, but I wouldn't want to tell you exactly what they all were because they were hilarious. And Jason Aaron is the master of random, and I love random stuff, and it's just hilarious. And then you get to the end and you find out what he's really the god of, and you're like, oh.
Defies your expectations in every single way. The
he takes a joke.
Of this book.
He takes a joke. You flip the page, and he turns it into a cliffhanger that's terrifying and jaw-dropping. Fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, and this is supposedly. I just want to let people know that might be wanting to jump onto this book. It says God Bomb Part 1. This is supposedly the start of a new arc, but this
you
is
need to read everything
so intricately connected to the stuff before. This is not a jumping on point. It's kind of deceptive. Putting a Part 1 on the cover, I think that's kind of weird.
I think they did that just trying to get people to buy it because we're a few issues in. I don't think that you're going to have a jumping on point for this book until the gore stuff is finished.
Agreed. So I highly recommend this book. It's fantastic. I can't say enough good things about it. We've been raving about this ever since it started.
Well, Dan, now that we finished Uncanny Thor, let's go on to Uncanny X-Men number 4. And this surprised me because I opened it up and I went, oh, wait a minute, I'm reading a scene I read last week. And I was reading a scene I read last week in All New X-Men because this is one of those issues that goes to a scene, we see this sometimes, that goes to a scene from another issue that happened recently that gives it from somebody else's perspective, and actually in this case shows you a whole other dialogue exchange from telepaths. And then it very quickly gives you the answer to the thing you and I were trying to, and I'm glad I didn't make a bet with you, Dan. The big thing that we were trying to figure out, which was which of the original 5 X-Men is going to join the X-Men and Cyclops' team, apparently the Uncanny X-Men.
Yeah.
And it was Angel, and you were right, and you win. And here's that money I owe you. Anyway, So Dan, what did you think of this one? What did you think of how interconnected this was and how you absolutely have to be reading both of these books right now?
I think it's really interesting the way Bendis chose to handle this because he gives us the answer to the cliffhanger from the last issue, so if you're reading both books, it's a more enriching experience. But if you notice, he was very specific in how little he gave us. He's giving us the answer, but he's not giving the character reasons for why Angel switched sides in this issue. He's waiting until the All New X-Men issue where he promised that would be paid off. I thought that was a very smart choice. I loved all the stuff he did with Emma Frost and the Stepford Cuckoos in here. You get the reason for why they switched sides in this issue, which wasn't something that I was necessarily keen on knowing based on the All New X-Men issue.
I didn't need it, but all right.
It's cool to get that here. It was a nice role reversal for Emma Frost where she's getting her brain picked by these 3 psychics, and that's a role that she always does to other people, so it's interesting to see her put in that position, sort of taken down a peg. Emma Frost especially is a character that doesn't like to be taken down any pegs at all. She's very uppity and not arrogant. She might have been when she was a villain, but she's very sure of herself, and it's interesting to see her put in this position with her powers downgraded and stuff. All of these characters with their powers downgraded, I think Bendis is doing some really interesting things with their characters, each of them.
We are now several issues into All New X-Men. Wait, are we 10 issues into that book already?
10 issues?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
And we're only 4 issues into this, and I've been waiting to say this because I couldn't be absolutely positive, but and you're absolutely right, by the way, in that he is keeping the focus where he always intended it to be from the beginning. He's not losing sight of that. I mean, like the All New X-Men is about that team, and especially the original 5, and this is about this team absolutely. But I'm going to say this now. This is one story.
Yes,
it's complicated, there's a lot of characters, but it is one story, and if you're reading one of these but not the other, I caution you because I think that there's going to come a point where you're going to get lost.
I agree.
And I hate to say that. I never want to tell people you must read more money or you must pay more money or you won't be able to follow this. But guys, this stuff comes out twice a month. He's putting a lot of character stuff in these things, and there's a lot of characters. I think he needs 2 books, dude. And I think he needs 2 books that are coming out twice a month, or this would take forever.
He's making a good case for X-Men being a weekly book.
He absolutely is.
He's doing so many interesting things with the characters that I'm just so engaged. Like, you have these kid characters that he has in the new Xavier School where they're sort of learning their powers and they're sort of growing into those roles. And then you have the complete flip of that with the teachers where they lost their power and they're trying to figure out how to gain those powers back. So they're learning along with the kids. The kids aren't sure if these teachers are even competent to be teaching them things when, like, they don't even have the full grasp of their powers. It's such an interesting place to take these characters and just oppose them with each other. I can't get enough of the character stuff that he's doing in here.
One of my favorite lines in this is when one of the New Mutants toward the end says, there is something I absolutely love about Cyclops and then something else that just mortifies me.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like how Bendis is keeping Cyclops so much more in character than I thought anybody could possibly keep him after the incredibly drastic move he made when he had the Phoenix Force. And I really thought that he was just going to turn into a kind of supervillain Cyclops, and that hasn't happened. It's more complicated than that. And I know I've said that a lot, but here I think he really drives that point home. I want to ask you a question. Is there still a book being published right now called New Mutants?
I don't think so.
Because I can't remember if they canceled that book or if it's still good. If not, they need a book called New Mutants, and they need to have some New Mutants in it. Because this is the first time where I think that title makes like more sense than it ever has. Like there are New Mutants, and they came and they popped up and they have powers suddenly, and there should be a book called that with some of these people in it.
Yeah, the kids at that school could easily have their own team and their own book. That's a good point. I never thought. I think New Mutants was canceled a while ago, so that book is sort of on the table.
They could call it.
Getting with Bendis on it. I wouldn't be surprised if that book gets launched soon.
They could call it Uncanny New Mutants. So, I also keep cracking up about this kid with the ball powers. Because there's that whole... Sometimes I get annoyed when they feel the need to put names next to everybody and tell you, like who they are. But I guess only when I already know. Like in this book, I was sort of like, well, we've been with these guys a little while. I'm surprised you're still doing that. And it was mostly... And it's not a big deal. But here, it was mostly kind of for a joke, where it was like... here's this person's name. They haven't picked the code name yet. And then here's this person's name. And they have picked the code name. And here's what... I like that guy is calling himself Triage. I think that's cool. And then, because he's got healing powers, he's Triage. Yeah. And then they go to the guy with the balls, and he says, and they have his name, and then it says, Gold Balls is a terrible superhero name, or mutant name, or whatever. And I was like, yes, it is. And I hope at some point he picks a moniker.
I'm liking those kid characters a lot more than I ever expected to, especially
too.
The scene where the shapeshifter and the person that you would mention talking about Cyclops, that conversation, I thought was really interesting, not only in that they had some commentary about the characters in the book, but you also see the little spark of a relationship forming between the two of them. And as they're talking, he starts to shapeshift into her.
Yeah.
It could have been more on the nose if it wasn't played right in the dialogue, where he's turning into her, obviously he likes her, right? But the way the dialogue's played off, I think it's played off well enough that you feel like he's turning into her because he's slipping, because he's sort of nervous around her, and that's pretty typical of young relationships where you're sort of nervous about reaching out to someone of the opposite sex because you're afraid of rejection and you don't know what's going to happen. I thought it was really realistic. I really enjoyed that.
And you know what? I said that sometimes that annoys me. Actually, I really appreciate those names here just because I keep having to remind myself what their powers are. And it also tells us their powers. So the one that makes time bubbles, also, she's got a name now. She calls herself Tempest. That's great. That's a good one.
Yeah, I like that name a lot.
Well, do you want to move on?
Yeah, sure.
Great issue. Really good stuff.
Yeah, great stuff.
I really recommend people reading this. X-Men is my favorite thing going on right now, and I'm not usually a big X-Men guy, but I'm turning into one, and I'm really liking this stuff. But like I said before, if you really want to read this stuff and you feel like you got to pick one or the other because of your time on cash or whatever it is, you might want to wait for trade, because I just don't see reading one of these. I think so far you could maybe get away with it, but as it's going on, I really see this turning into a book where if you try to do that, you're gonna get lost. I really think that.
Yeah, this is one of those books. These two books, I think, are going to be eventually collected into an omnibus with them both smack dab together. Like, they won't be separated. Like the Bendis' New Avengers omnibus, where you get like all those various Avengers titles that he launched.
I'm scared to death to get a week where they both come out at once, and I'm not sure which one I'm supposed to read first. Like, I really hope that doesn't happen. Let's go ahead and move on now to Uncanny Avengers number 6. Uncanny everything! So, this is not about the Uncanny Avengers except for one, and that's Thor, and this is all about Thor in the past fighting Apocalypse!
I'm to Jason Aaron's past Thor, interestingly enough, which is very cool.
You're right, that is what that is. Yeah, because we don't usually see Thor quite that far back, do we? And he's got a weapon that's not Mjolnir. Is that something that's been in other comics before?
That was the axe that he was using early on in Jason Aaron's flashbacks.
Okay, I forgot what he had. Did it have a name there, or did Remender?
I don't think it had. I don't think it was named, but maybe that's an axe from mythology that Thor had used before the hammer. I'm not really sure.
I didn't know Remender could write Thor. I think his voice for Thor is fine.
Oh, it's fantastic. I thought he did a great job of tying into what Jason Aaron was doing thematically in his book with that character, because you have Apocalypse in this issue. When he's fighting him, he's like, he says God in quotation marks, sort of calling into the question his godhood and whether or not gods are able to stand up to people like him, who's supposedly immortal. Like, the blending of that line is something that Jason Aaron's thematically playing with, and that's not like the huge crux of this, but Remender touches on it because that's one of the things Thor's dealing with at the time, and it also plays on the whole thing that Aaron was doing in his run, where this Thor's arrogant, he's headstrong, and he's selfish, and he's going to make mistakes, and he's going to screw a bunch of people over because he has all this power.
Naturally, I picked up on that, but it didn't occur to me that it was... I just forgot. It didn't occur to me that he was doing Jason Aaron's early Thor. That's fantastic, yeah. I mean, I was thinking about it, because I was like, oh, that's like what Aaron's doing, but I forgot it was the same time period. That's neat.
It's very, very cool stuff.
They have some fun banter, him and Apocalypse, and I love Apocalypse's old Four Horsemen. I like the guy with a giant eyeball for a head.
Yeah, Remender's doing such a good job of blending X-Men and Avengers, where, like, you would never think the Red Skull... Like, I would have never thought the Red Skull would have been, like, an interesting villain for the X-Men, but he totally is. And I think Apocalypse could be a cool Thor villain after this.
Yeah, and you kind of think about it, and I think there's a little bit of a commentary on Marvel going on here, where it's like X-Men has always been so separate from the rest of the Marvel Universe, at least a lot of the time, where I think Remender's making a great case for, not only does it make sense for some of these villains to fight these guys, but why haven't they before? Right. Apocalypse has been around forever. How is he not ever tangled with any immortals? What's that about? You know what I mean? And so it's weird. Like, why is Apocalypse an X-Men villain as opposed to just a straight up Marvel like Marvel villain? You know what I mean? Like, how is Apocalypse not more in the limelight like Thanos is? It makes a lot of sense. And so I like that.
The interesting thing about this issue is, at first glance, you think, oh, this is just a standalone Thor fighting Apocalypse issue. What is this? And then we realize the through line through this whole thing is Kang the Conqueror.
Yep.
And we get a very cool reveal at the end, which has one of my favorite Doctor Strange villains somehow involved in this whole thing. So I was very, very excited to see that. Remender's just doing such a good job of taking these old ideas and making... I mean, Apocalypse obviously is an idea that had happened before, but he's putting new spins on them, making the old feel fresh, like he would said. the advantage he has here is that these villains had never fought at each other before because had been so isolated. So it feels fresh and new. But he's just sort of playing the same ideas off of each other that had existed before, just different ones.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like what's cool is I feel like we're in territory we haven't been in before, but then also in familiar territory at the same time, like you're saying. And so what we have is putting Thor in a place where we're used to. What happens here is the beginning of the Thor movie. Really, it's Thor. Thor gets Asgard in the middle of something that he doesn't need to get him in the middle of, and it's just for his own petty fulfillment. He wants revenge because Apocalypse made him look bad. I mean, that's all it is. And so then
we even have the scene kind of like from the Thor movie where he calls Odin an old man and a fool.
So it's just an example, like a major example that you haven't seen before of something that we already know about Thor's background, but it doesn't feel like rehash. It's sort of like, oh, we're bringing this universe more together, and I really enjoyed that. I can't wait moving forward to see what other villains they do this with, and I like that it's not just one or the other. It's, well, we're gonna do Avengers villain, we're gonna do an X-Men villain, we're gonna do another Avenger, and then we're gonna take Avengers villains and X-Men villains, put them together, and make an Avengers X-Men sandwich, make an Uncanny Avengers sandwich. Anyway, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was quite fun. And, I mean, it's not real. There's not a whole lot of real giant, deep thematic stuff going on. It's mostly a big giant fight, and like I said, an example of something you know already. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's got some great character stuff, and I feel like after the Red Skull stuff, Remender's been sort of putting pieces on a chessboard. Like, he's got this Red Skull. What was the villain that Red Skull was combined with? I can't think of the name off the top of my head.
He was combined with Onslaught. Yeah, thank you.
So you have the Red Skull Onslaught on the table. He's doing something you don't really know what he's doing.
By the way, I'm sorry, I just want to throw this out there because I know you haven't read a lot of 90s stuff with X-Men. You know why he's combined with Onslaught, right?
No, I had no idea.
Professor Xavier was Onslaught.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Professor Xavier, it's this whole convoluted thing, but basically there was this evil personality for Xavier, and it turned into Onslaught, I think is how it went. It's been forever since I've read it, but anyway, it makes perfect sense for them to mix Red Skull with Onslaught, because he's got Professor Xavier's brain, and so that's why it's Onslaught, I think. If anybody knows more than I do about that, leave a comment, but I think that's the idea.
Right, so you have him on the table, you have Kang jumping around in time, doing things, you don't really know what his end goal is.
Because you never do.
He's sort of the mastermind manipulating what seems like almost everything in Remender's run so far, except for the initial Red Skull stuff.
Yes.
And then you have Apocalypse on the table, and there was an announcement recently showing. I don't want to give away who it is for people who might not have found out. There was a cover solicited for issue 10 showing new Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse in the present, so we know Apocalypse is going to be coming to the present soon.
Cool.
We have all these villains on the table. Remender is obviously setting up something big. So this is a really interesting character issue, but it's also set up for what's to come too. So,
is one of the Four Horsemen Angela?
No.
I just. That
would have been funny.
It's kind of my running joke right now, is that if there's a big secret, it must be Angela. Well, do you want to move on?
Sure.
Okay. So anyway, that's a really fun one. Get that. That was great. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Age of Ultron, Book 5, which I like to refer to, Dan, I don't know if you'll agree with this, as Age of Ultron Book 5 / ought to have been Book 1. This was fine. I really enjoyed this, and I feel like this is a great jumping on point. I think you can start right here. And if you've not been reading, I really think that. And if you've not been reading Age of Ultron, just read 5 through the end of it, because it does a nice job of telling you everything that's happened already that was given to you in really short, like really elongated, exposition, and then actually moves at a decent clip. And gives you a lot of kind of interesting revelations about things that are going on, but a lot of it is stuff that if you know very much, and I didn't, but if you know very much about like Vision and Ultron and stuff like that, you'd already know some of this stuff anyway. I'm not sure why he didn't just start here, because this makes books 1 through 4 pretty much just, for the most part, look like just a whole lot of ambiance and not much else. That's how I feel about it. What do you think, Dan?
I disagree to some degree, obviously, just because we haven't gotten the whole series yet, so I think it's a little quick to judge, considering that we had them, Moon Knight and Black Widow scourging around in Fury's base, and we know Fury has some sort of plan on the table. We don't know what his endgame is. We meet him here, and we know there's a little bit more going on there, but we just haven't found out yet. So I think judging the past stuff in that regard, I think I just want to see where he's going before I write all that stuff off, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but what is there to write off, really, except there they are? Like, I don't feel like much of that character stuff is with a lot of those characters that you were talking about before, once we get to this, is really anything but him kind of, like playing with people and having them say interesting things. Plot-wise, I don't know that we needed anything before this issue. I'm
just saying that he might pull some of that stuff later, and it might matter plot-wise.
Well, you know I'm not going to remember what it was, so when it comes back, I'm just saying, I'm sorry. I really have not been on board with this book until now. This I liked a lot more, and you have to admit, Dan, that compared to this book, the first 4 issues are really molasses slow.
Well, I mean, we did get the death of Luke Cage in the previous issues, too. We did get the death of She-Hulk in the previous issues. We did get the revelation about the Vision in issue 2.
But I know that, but none of that's going to matter because it's all going to get wiped away at the end.
Not necessarily. They're dealing with time travel here. Wolverine's talking about changing things in the past. They're going to the future thinking about changing things. There have been solicits for future issues that say that this is going to be affecting things. Indestructible Hulk, I think, has an issue that comes out after this ends that's directly affected by it. It says Fallout of Age of Ultron and stuff. So
you think it's going. So let me ask you this then.
Sure.
But it might affect some things, but they're not going to keep all those characters dead. They've killed Thor.
No.
I mean, they're not going to keep all these characters dead.
No, they're not going to keep all the characters dead, but I'm not. That's not to say that they might not keep some of them dead, or one of them, or something.
Maybe so. You're right. It could happen. I don't know. I guess I don't know. You're right. Maybe I'm making judgment calls too early, but this still feels like a superfluous kind of thing that's going to get retconned on. And we've heard that before. We've heard, oh, this will change things, and then it's so minor. Who cares, right? Like we've heard that. I'm not going to trust solicits. I'm
just saying, like. Reviewing an issue can be tough sometimes because it's like watching 15 minutes of a movie and then saying, oh, you know, because the way the comics are written now, they're written like movies as opposed to episodes of television shows where it's like,
oh yeah, you're right.
It's one big story, that sort of thing. I just don't want to write it off so early. That's just my only apprehension about it, especially since this is Bendis' finale for his Avengers run. I feel like he has something big planned. I feel like he wants to leave a final lasting mark in the book before he leaves.
That's fair.
Just the way.
I'm probably being unfair, and I was somewhat joking just because I was so bored with the first 4 issues.
I thought that the ethical argument was a bit weird, where Wolverine was talking about if we talk to these people, they're just gonna. If we talk to Hank Pym, if we go back in the past and tell him, not to create Ultron, he's just gonna do it anyway. Why don't you, take a video or a picture or something and be like, look, Ultron destroys humanity. This is the future we're from. Don't make him. You don't necessarily have to kill him. Just show him the repercussions of the things he's going to do.
Yeah.
He said that, maybe that wouldn't matter because he'll just think he'll be able to do it better, but maybe I just don't know Hank Pym's character well enough because I don't really know Hank Pym, but
yeah, but he is.
I don't know. I thought that was a little shaky.
He's more awful than I ever thought he was. If that's really how he is, if everybody in this, almost everybody thinks that, right? Where everybody's like, oh yeah, you know what, you're right. He'll just take it as a challenge. Really? Like if he knows the whole world's gonna be kind of blown up over this? Yeah, I was with you. That's weird.
If that was Tony Stark, I could maybe buy it because that's kind of who Tony Stark is. But I don't
even know if I would buy it there, but
yeah, Wolverine's making a vast generalization about it that I think is a little too. I don't know. I resisted that a little bit, but Yeah, we'll have to see.
Do you kind of wonder a little bit about Bendis and time travel sometimes? I feel like Bendis has this kind of loose idea about time travel. Like, first of all, we've gotten some comments about this, and we've never addressed it, and we should. Just the notion back with X-Men that you can rip people from the past, bring them to the present, and it doesn't immediately change things. I don't understand that. Here, the notion that anybody would ever think, let's go to the future and stop him from coming back to the past is absolutely ridiculous. It's not, and I don't care what theory of time travel you're talking about. If you have an Earth that looks like this, Dan, and you go to the future to stop the guy from sending things to the past to make that happen, the future is going to have the guy who did this already in it.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. I don't understand why that logic... Now, I'm glad, because I would have pulled my hair out if somebody hadn't said, no, we should also go to the past. But the idea that anybody thinks that maybe they can go to the future and learn something, but they're not going to be able to change anything about the past by going to the future, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't even think that deeply about it, but that's a point.
Well, time travel is always a wonky thing in the first place because since it's not a real thing, nobody knows how it would actually work, right? Mm-hmm. So, or at least since it's not a thing that we've ever figured out how to do. By the way, one of my favorite, I don't remember where I saw this, but one of my favorite opinions about time travel ever was, well, I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist because if you could go back in time, somebody would have come back already, and we would have heard about it. you know what I mean? I never thought about that before. It's like, well, inevitably we would have met a time traveler at some point if it was possible, especially if a lot of people were doing it. But yeah, so I don't know if and I feel this way with both of these books now. I don't know if Bendis is saying, okay, look, I'm going to give up with the whole let's explain time travel thing and just use it as a device to tell character story, to do character development and stuff. Or if he's got a plan for how to actually explain it in this book and in X-Men, and he just hasn't revealed it yet. I don't really trust that. At the same time, time travel is this really wonky thing that like it's too easy to fix at the end no matter what you're talking about. So as long as there are some really interesting thematic and character stuff and it goes to a place and it's not just an easy wipe thing at the end, I'm not going to be that upset if the time travel doesn't make sense because it's time travel. It doesn't always make sense.
Right, exactly.
Terminator's that way. The time travel doesn't totally make sense, but I like a lot of stuff that goes on in it, and so I'll forgive it because it's time travel.
Right, exactly. That's the way I feel about it too. Like, even if he doesn't end up explaining the X-Men thing, I'd be totally fine with that, just because I'm so engaged in what he's doing with the characters. And
I still want something. That's just me. But yes,
the difference with Age of Ultron, I think, is that it's becoming an integral part of the plot now.
Yes.
Like with X-Men, that's just the conceit. And then the story moves forward from there. We're actually having people travel back and forth through time. Ultron is sending things through time. He's in the future. Like, it's such an integral part to the plot of the story now that you almost have to make it make sense for the kind of stories he's trying to tell. So hopefully we do get some explanation in that regard. You're right. I would hope so in this book specifically.
Yeah.
X-Men, I don't really care.
Well, I still think we shouldn't get into this. I was just going to say, I do still think it kind of matters in X-Men just because you rip people from the past and you bring them to the present. What's going on back then now? How does the present not get affected by that? I feel like you could come up with some kind of an easy conceit for it, where like you put time in some sort of a bubble so that it's kind of whatever you do, where it's kind of stable until you put them back. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a feeling what he might do is have it be a bad repercussion for Beast and him have to deal with that, because that's something that he mentioned in that conversation with Cyclops. He's like, you rip people from the past just because you felt like it on a whim to make me feel bad.
I mean, if you'll recall, when we've had things like... We're talking about the same universe where when we have something like Days of Future Past, they send people to the past to change the past so that the future's different. Mm-hmm. And they expect that to happen instantaneously. So you can't, in the same universe, rip people from the past and then expect your present not to change.
That's very true.
If it had never happened before, okay, but you're talking about a universe where we've done this before a lot.
Right, exactly.
And in X-Men, it's kind of important. We've talked about how this is sort of like Days of Future Present or something. You know what I mean? So
yeah, the Age of Ultron is sort of like Days of Future Past in that it's just sort of like the Sentinels hunt down and kill all of the mutants except for a few people, but this is just like humans being killed off. I mean, in Ultron had that sort of motivation going on since he was created, so I guess, that's what he's been trying to do since, like, the 70s or whatever.
I have to say, I've been too hard on this, I'm sorry. The Vision stuff is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I love the whole business with Hank Pym saying, yeah, okay, I kind of created the thing that originally became Ultron, but it became self-aware and got really smart and built itself into what it is, so it's not entirely my fault. And then also the whole business of we weren't really very smart, were we, to treat Vision so much like just a person and then like let him marry Scarlet Witch and like pretend like he wasn't. He didn't come out of this. Here's the thing. One of the things I appreciate about this book is that I never knew that was Vision's backstory. I had no idea, so I really appreciated having that here. Yeah. Anyway, like I said, this was quite good. I got reservations about the time travel, but this was quite good, and I just wish that I had been on board with this 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that. The pacing wise, like, I think some of the beats in the previous issues are important. But I wish that some of the big, because like I had talked a little bit before about how Brian Hitch and Brian Bendis I think is not the best fit in the world because you have the talky guy and the guy with that does big widespread action as his sort of that's his forte. That's what he's known for doing. I think a lot of the big action sweeping or like sweeping landscape panels could have been cut out of the first like 3 issues, and you could have had like this be issue 3 maybe.
Sure.
I think that would have been adequate pacing.
Sure.
For me personally.
Well, and the thing is, if we didn't have the cliffhangers. See, I would have felt bad if we hadn't been able to make fun of the cliffhangers of Captain America is sitting down and then Captain America stands up. I appreciate the pacing of that book just so that we could talk about that because it's hilarious. Anyway,
if we had that Vision cliffhanger at the end of issue 1, I think that would have been good.
I honestly think that's where it should have been. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to admit I was perhaps exaggerating, but I still sort of feel that way just for me. If I picked this up and read it, I would have been excited, but wasn't with this.
Right.
Let's go ahead and move on, Dan. You've got one by yourself to start us off with our solo section. Go ahead.
I've got Star Wars number 4. This is by Brian Wood.
Ooh, I like that cover.
Yeah, Alex Ross is killing it on covers.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I think issue 6 is his either last one or he's just giving the job up for a few issues. I don't know, but this is the usual creative team. The part 4 of the In the Shadow of Yavin arc, and this is still dealing with the rebels trying to find a new base of operations, which, as we know, will eventually be Hoth in Empire. This is sort of dealing with the Leia's Black Ops sort of espionage rebel X-Wing squadron. They're going around trying to find the homeworld. They're being chased by the Imperials at every turn. They think there's a spy among them, but they can't really find a hole in their chain of command that makes any sort of sense. So they don't really know what's going on. We get a really interesting revelation about Luke's visions that he gets from Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I don't know if it contradicts Return of the Jedi. There's something they do in here where someone else can hear the Force visions when he's having them.
Interesting.
Which Leia wasn't able to experience at the end of the Return of the Jedi when Luke sees Ben and Yoda at the end. She can't see them. So it calls into question, is the person that who heard the visions, are they trained in the Force? And they're not letting on that fact.
Wow.
Which is sort of interesting. There's also some cool stuff with middle management Darth Vader. He's getting a little bit frustrated. The Emperor has unrealistic expectations for the building of the new Death Star. And Vader's going there, obviously, to have to enforce the Emperor's will. The workers there are sort of fed up. They don't know what to do. And Vader is just struggling, being in the role of a thug. He feels sort of trapped. He doesn't know what to do. Really interesting stuff there. Han Solo, and in between that is juxtaposed with just Han Solo and Chewbacca flying around doing cool stuff on the Millennium Falcon. It's cool action stuff. So it's Star Wars in every sense of the word. You get some good character stuff. You get some great action. I can't recommend this book highly enough. It's making a great case for being a meaningful part of the original trilogy, which is not many things can say that they've added positively to the trilogy of the movies. Most of them, do stuff after. Telling a story in between these movies especially wasn't something that I thought would have warranted an ongoing series anyway, but this is really good stuff. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. Every time you mention middle management Darth Vader, I just keep wondering when in that series he starts singing Chocolate Rain. All right, so I'm gonna go on now to my first solo book, Dan, and this is Batman and number 19, which I like to call Batman ampersand. So right now they're just calling this Batman and because of course Robin has tragically died, and so it's Batman and whoever he's hanging out with. Kind of like the whole thing with Captain America for a while during the Brubaker run at the end.
Title on the regular numbered book.
When it was like Captain America and Bucky, and then what was funny about that was that the book was still technically called Captain America. They didn't do like the and thing. I don't think in the publication stuff. But then they put out a Captain America #1 at the same time, so you technically kind of had two books called Captain America at the same time.
Yeah, and when they renumber it again, they're going to count both of those.
Yeah, well, maybe, so I'm not sure what they're going to do with it. But anyway, this is Batman and right now. You get the sense that this might eventually turn into Batman and Robin again, especially because they've now added Carrie Kelly, which some people are excited about, some people are not. Obviously, Dan just gave me a snake hiss, so he's clearly not excited about this at all.
That's not something I ever wanted to see personally.
It's Batman and Robin, and then it says, is the Dark Knight's new partner. It's not Jimmy Olsen, Dan. anyway, so what we get here is not an issue I loved, mostly because I think Batman gets far out of character, and this could just be my personal opinion. I feel like what we've got with a lot of the Bat books right now is kind of 4 or 5 entirely different interpretations of Batman that are all in continuity, and I feel like Scott Snyder's Batman would not do this. I don't know that Greg Hurwitz's Batman would do this. I'm absolutely positive that he wouldn't. I think that he's more level-headed than this. Everybody seems to have a different take on how Batman is handling the death of Damian Wayne. Here, Peter Tomasi's answer to how Batman handles Damian Wayne is that regardless of how he is likely to come back as a crazy, hideous monster, he wants to bring Damian Wayne back from the dead, which I really resist. I really resist it. I feel like with all of Batman's dealings with the Lazarus Pit and with things like that, with the way with the really complicated and kind of a crazy way that they brought Jason Todd back and how Batman had to deal with that. It seems like that he would not so quickly be obsessed enough to try to bring Damian Wayne back from the dead. It's an idea I resist. And the way
I resist that too. I'm with you on that.
And the way he does it is completely out there. They bring in Frankenstein, Agent of Shade. And Batman basically kidnaps Frankenstein, and he makes Frankenstein try to help him bring Damian back by doing surgery on Frankenstein. And I couldn't even believe that he went there.
We're talking like Frank and Damien? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And Frankenstein is imploring him not to do this because he doesn't want anybody to come back and be like he is, because he says, I am neither dead or alive. And what I really like is, what I do like in this is, Tomasi has a great voice for Frankenstein. I really like Frankenstein in this. And I read the first couple issues of Frankenstein Agent of Shade, and when it first started, and I really liked it. And honestly, I kind of wish I'd kept going with it. It's not really my style of book, but I wanted to try it, and so I only quit on it because I was reading other things. I also did that with Red Lanterns after a few issues, and I wish I'd stayed on that book because I don't know why. I'm not a Lantern guy, but I really liked that book. I'll go back and get the rest of it. Every time I think about Red Lanterns, I get a little sad. I'm like, oh yeah, that book was great. Anyway, I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Carrie, the Kelly Carey thing, I don't have a lot. I'm sorry. Carrie Kelly, not Kelly. Don't have two first names that both sound like girl names. Anyway, I don't have much to say about her. I do kind of like the way that Bruce Wayne first meets her, because she's wearing a Robin costume right away. She's at a costume party and she's wearing a Robin costume, and I think that's kind of funny.
It's like Velma.
A little bit, yeah. But yeah, basically, she was tutoring Damian Wayne. She was like working with him. She's like a thespian person, and she was working with him on something. And I'm a little fuzzy on exactly what. I don't know if it was martial arts or if it was just he was like in thespian class or something. I'm not sure. Maybe I needed to read this closer. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there. But anyway, and so that's basically Bruce Wayne has to show up to write her a check for the remaining sessions that he had with her, and so you kind of meet her and you get to know her personality a little bit, and she's likable, she's fun. It's an odd way to introduce a character, but okay, there it is. And I don't know, this could be okay. Like, somebody's got to be Robin. I don't know. I mean, you're going to bring in Robin again. You don't really want to demote Tim Drake, especially because in this universe, apparently, he was never actually Robin somehow. So, anyway, and it's also funny because this week is called Batman and Red Robin, and I haven't even mentioned anything about Red Robin because he's barely in it.
So, is she, like, becoming Robin in that book? Is that the deal? Like, does she go out and fight crime with Batman?
No, not yet. And I don't know if she's even going to. I would assume that you wouldn't introduce her unless she was going to. You know what I'm saying? I guess I'm making an assumption, but I mean, like, really, Carrie Kelly has never been in mainstream DC continuity, as far as I know, to just suddenly introduce her and just have her be this random person who wears a Robin costume, because that's funny. I kind of think that down the road, they'll probably integrate her. It would be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, it would be stupid not to if they're just going to introduce her as a marketing play, which, I mean, either way you look at it, that's what it is. She was only brought back because she was in a really popular book done by Frank Miller that a lot of people like.
That's right.
It's just sort of frustrating to me that, like, Batman's continuity got condensed to, like, 5 years, and DC's all about, like, oh, we can't have too many characters, and then they bring back... Every Batman character's up for grabs, but, like, characters that people have been begging them to want to see, like, Wally West, for example, my favorite DC character. He's not allowed to exist, where, like, Carrie Kelly can. I don't know, that's just sort of frustrating to me.
That's fair. Also,
it's just the politics of the thing, I suppose.
Also, we did briefly have a female Robin in regular continuity that people liked. That was Spoiler. And
Stephanie.
Thank you. And where is Stephanie Brown? I haven't seen her since the relaunch.
She was supposed to be in that Smallville book, and then at the last minute, the editorial made them change it to Barbara Gordon.
Oh, really? Well, that tells you that she's going to be somewhere in this at some point. But I mean, like, I would have just brought her back and let her be permanently or for a long time Robin. I don't think anybody would have minded that. Do you?
No, a lot of people were reacting that way.
I mean, a lot of people wanted her to be. A lot of people were upset that she's not Batgirl anymore. But like, but I don't feel like making her Robin's a demotion necessarily. As much as it would be if you did it to Red Robin, I don't think, just because she's not anywhere right now. That's all I'm saying. Because she can't be Batgirl anyway, because that's Barbara Gordon right now. So like, I'd like to see her someplace.
Right, exactly. It's just such a there's too many Bat Family characters, not enough space for them, Like, I like all of them, especially like Cassandra Cain, too. Where is she?
Yeah, I love Cassandra Cain, and she got written off really fast, and that's a character that should have gotten to do a lot more stuff before 52. Now she's nowhere. And they brought her in to a Red Robin, and she got to do some cool stuff in that book, and then, after 52, I haven't seen her. I've not been reading everything, naturally, but I don't think she's been anywhere. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was long-winded. I gotta say, I can't recommend this one. I didn't care for it very much. I just thought that Batman was characterized too simplistically, and he's way too over the edge here. And I feel like after a lot of the things he has experienced with Loss before, I feel like he would be smarter than this. I really don't like the idea that you have a character who has been through this stuff before, and he reacts exactly the same way again, except maybe even more extreme. You know what I mean? Where he's just obsessed with it.
Exactly.
Too obsessed with it. Anyway, but, I mean, maybe some people are okay with that, being characterized that way. This is somewhat of a taste thing. I didn't care for it. Go ahead, Dan.
The last book that I have is Hawkeye, number 9.
Oh, that's fun. I love those covers.
Yeah, they're so great. This is by Matt Fraction and David Aja. And this is basically an examination of all of the female relationships that Clint Barton has in his life. and sort of using them, examining them to come to a conclusion that Clint Barton is a guy that doesn't know how to settle down and be emotionally available for people. And it's a really great character study in that way, where we first start off, it's out of sequence, so it's a sort of thing where you have to piece it all together, and there's payoffs to jokes and things like that. Like, there's this one joke where Clint has an old style answering machine, and he clicks a button when he's in his apartment with Bobby, who was his ex-wife. And it's like, who still has tape answering machines? Are you kidding me, Bart? And then you realize later it's actually Kate, the female teenager Hawkeye, calling him later on in a wacky situation. And it's really funny. So it's interesting because we have Black Widow, who was an ex-lover of Clint's. You have Bobby, who's Mockingbird, Clint's ex-wife, and then you have Spider-Woman, who is his current girlfriend on the Avengers, and this woman that Clint had been trying to help out previously in the issue that he also did previously in this series that he did sleep with. This red-headed, mysterious woman that comes in and out of his life when she needs help, and he doesn't really know what her motives are. He just wants to help her out. It's really interesting because that redhead coming into his life sort of causes a rift between all of the other women in his life, and you realize that maybe by the end he was helping this woman, and she might not have the most noble of intentions, but she's sort of a victim at the same time. It's really interesting, much more complicated than I ever thought this book was going to be. Like, at the beginning, it was all sort of framed in a way where it looked like everything was a one and done, but Fraction's sort of piecing little threads from all those issues together and making a bigger story out of it. It's really interesting. And there's a tragic death for one of the supporting characters, one of the people in Clint's apartment, that I thought was always really funny. That was really sad to see. So, and there's supposedly a supervillain finally coming into this book too. So that's very cool. I can't recommend this book enough. Hawkeye is one of Marvel's best series being published right now. It has a lot of stiff competition, granted, because pretty much everything that I'm reading at Marvel is fan-freaking-tastic. But this is one of their best books, so highly recommend this.
Last thing I'm going to talk about real quick, I don't have much to say about this one, is Batman Arkham Unhinged number 13. We've got a lot of issues of this book kind of going, okay, here's a supervillain that briefly appears in the game and let's do something with them, or here's one that appears a lot but let's do something else with them that you didn't see in the game. This time we tackle Black Mask, and a lot of what Derek Friedhoff likes to do in this book is to give kind of some alternate origins for some of these villains in this continuity. And so here we see Black Mask as kind of a foil for Bruce Wayne. Not only a foil, but he sees Bruce Wayne more than Batman as his arch nemesis, which I think is really interesting, because he was raised by parents who didn't think anything of him and didn't pay much attention to him because they were too worried about their business, and they were multimillionaires like the Waynes, and they were kind of rivals of the Waynes, and but I think they also did business with them, and one of the things that Black Mask grows up vehemently despising Bruce Wayne and his family, and of course his parents die, so then he despises Bruce Wayne more because he doesn't have them to try to kick around, and he starts to really hate the Waynes for kind of stealing his parents away from him, and that's kind of interesting. And there's a sort of pseudo abuse situation, which I usually would look at as kind of a cliche because you always go that way, but it's really just wrong in this book, and I don't know. There's some stuff with his backstory that really bothered me, and I think he was supposed to. But anyway, so what I really like is that his parents. This was cool. His parents owned the steel mill that the Joker uses as his hideout in Arkham City. You remember playing the game, the steel mill. So that's his building. So when he gets thrown into Arkham City, that's the first place he goes because it's rightfully his. Black Mask is depicted here as, usually he's like a big mob boss and he's got a whole bunch of like henchmen and everything. And here he's depicted like in much more of a sympathetic way than I've ever seen him before. And he goes to that steel mill, and it's his, you know. I mean, he really should be able to have it by all rights, you know. And then, hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler, but it's kind of the coolest thing in the book, in the issue. You get to the end of it, and he basically there's a whole thing where he escapes Arkham City, and then he gets thrown back in, and then he realizes he wants to be there because it ends with Bruce Wayne getting thrown in, like he does at the very beginning of the game. And the issue ends with that scene that opens the game of Bruce Wayne getting thrown into Arkham City, and all Black Mask has wanted is his comeuppance on Bruce Wayne for you know, all of these years, because he blames, you know, other rich people for what happened with him and his parents. So anyway, not genius, but quite good, and I really enjoyed it.
That's really interesting that he's sort of a corporate tycoon in that, as opposed to a mob boss. It's a different take on him that I kind of like, because there aren't a ton of Batman villains, interestingly enough, that are corporate tycoons like Bruce Wayne is.
In fact, he's not a corporate tycoon. Part of the problem is that he should be, and he got everything taken away from him.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. What was your favorite book of the week?
Let's take a look.
I haven't thought about it.
I'm probably going to say Thor. I really enjoyed Thor this week. Just continuing to be one of the best series being published. I'm really, really enjoying that.
I agree with you. I think that is maybe the best book of the week. I don't want to pick the same thing you picked, so I'll do a second one too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I'll say my favorite book next to that one would probably have to be Uncanny X-Men, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was between those two for me when I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
I accidentally grabbed Star Trek by accident. I almost held it up.
Wouldn't that be great? Uncanny X-Men, it was fantastic. Well, anyway, everybody, thanks as always for watching New Acquisitions. Really hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be back with you again next Friday for lots more comic book reviews. And if you ever want to send in anything for us to review on the Vault, you can always send that to our P.O. Box. That's Geekvolution, P.O. Box 14183, Lenexa, Kansas 66285. Dan, thanks again for being on my computer. I sure appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you really soon. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And we'll see you later. Happy reading.